Hey, what's up everyone? How's it going? This is Waj, and in this video we'll be doing a direct head-to-head laptop comparison between the Dell XPS 13 and the all-new 12-inch MacBook with Retina Display. Now, the XPS 13 is one of my favorite Windows-based Ultrabook PCs. It has tons of great options, a fantastic display, and pretty decent battery life, and it's really in the direct lines of fire of what the new 12-inch is offering in terms of those things as well. So if you're interested in seeing what the advantages and disadvantages are on both sides, let's go ahead and take a look and see which laptop comes out on top, all things considered. Now, first things first, let's talk build quality. Now, both of these computers are made exceptionally well. They're all using pretty high quality components, but kind of different materials. The XPS 13 is a kind of a composite between a metal aluminum chassis, but there is still a fair bit of polycarbonate plastics all around the computer. Now, the palm rest inside the computer is made out of carbon fiber, which definitely gives the XPS 13 a cool and unique look. Now, by contrast, the 12-inch MacBook has a full aluminum unibody construction, and it's milled to perfection. It's really quite an exceptional piece of kit, and in my opinion, it's probably one of the coolest looking compact PCs you can get. Now, side by side, you can see both computers are quite similar, but the 12-inch MacBook is one of the thinnest computers you can get, measuring only about 13.1 millimeters at its thickest point, and at its thinnest point, it's about 3.5 millimeters, versus the XPS 13 ranges from 9 to 15 millimeters in terms of its thickness, but if you include the feet, it goes up to 20 millimeters, so it's definitely thicker than the MacBook. Now, in terms of weight, it really depends on which version of the XPS 13 you get. The non-touchscreen version measures about 1.1 kgs. If you get the touchscreen versions like we did, it measures about 1.26 kgs, and the MacBook is extremely light, only measuring about 920 grams. Now, moving forward, let's talk about the ports and connectivity options we have on both computers. Starting with the XPS 13, we have two USB 3 ports, one mini display port that can support up to 4K resolutions, a full-size SD card slot reader, as well as a headphone jack. Now, our 12-inch MacBook is pretty sparse. It only basically has two essential connections. You have a headphone jack on one side, and on the other side, you have USB Type-C connection, which is a port that has multiple different functions, including charging, data transferring, and outputting video and connecting to different accessories. Unfortunately, for the time being, since USB Type-C is so new, you're going to have to purchase a whole bunch of different USB Type-C adapters in order to make it work with your existing devices. Now, in terms of webcams, the XPS 13 actually comes with a 720p front-facing camera, and we have a 480p on the 12-inch MacBook. Now, the only awkward thing about the XPS 13, even though it has the higher resolution, is it's located on the bottom left-hand corner, which just makes the viewing angle a little bit awkward, but it's not too big of a deal, and you get used to it inevitably, and the camera is going to be a lot better because it's almost double the resolution. Now, the 12-inch MacBook has a completely new redesigned keyboard. It's super low profile, and that means that it has less key travel than a conventional low profile laptop keyboard that we encounter on the XPS 13, and I kind of prefer a keyboard that has a little bit more key travel, that gives you a better tactile sensation when typing on it, but the 12-inch MacBook keyboard isn't bad, and it's something that I'm sure people can get used to after a while. But one thing I do like about the 12-inch MacBook keyboard is its keycap sizes are larger than a traditional keyboard that has slim profiles, so they are larger than the XPS 13 keycaps and indeed the older generation MacBook keyboards. And additionally, I also like the key configuration that we have on the new 12-inch MacBook. It's something that I think is a little bit more ergonomic than the configuration on the XPS 13. Furthermore, both keyboards are fully LED backlit, which is definitely nice to see, something that I use constantly on a daily basis. And looking at the trackpads between these two, we have the new force detection trackpad on the 12-inch MacBook, which is a non-mechanical trackpad, and it uses the force touch technology to kind of gauge the actual force that you're sending to the trackpad. And with that, you can enable different things. Since it is pressure sensitive, you can enable the force click feature, which allows you to do a third click functionality on macOS 10. The trackpad on the XPS 13 is quite good as well. It's fairly large, and in terms of feel, it's etched glass, so it's the exact same kind of technology that you encountered on the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro from the previous generation that don't have the Force Touch trackpad. So definitely easy to use, and something that pretty much everyone can get accustomed to. Now, from my personal experience, I found that the MacBook trackpads are always a little bit more precise and a little bit less laggy than than conventional trackpads that we have on Windows, but the XPS 13 does a fairly good job of minimizing any latency or lag, so you have a pretty responsive feel on the trackpad as well. Still not as good as what I experienced on the 12-inch MacBook though. Now let's move on and finally talk about the displays on these two devices. Now the XPS 13 has a fantastic display. It's 13.3 inches in terms of size. It's actually a Quad HD display that is actually above the standard Quad HD resolution, so 3200 by 1800. They call it the Infinity display, and you could see why they call it that, because basically the borders are very thin, about 5.2 millimeters bezel size, so definitely looks really great. It looks like the screen is actually floating above the keyboard. Definitely has a cool futuristic look. Plus we have the touchscreen model over here, so you can interact with your operating system, either Windows 8 or Windows 10, using that capacitive touchscreen. A very intuitive and responsive display there, and that's great. You have multiple different options of control, something that the MacBooks don't have at this point. In terms of PPI, we're looking at 276 PPI. Now on the 12-inch MacBook side, it is using the Retina Display, so we're looking at a resolution of 2304 by 1440, and that has a PPI count of 226. So a little bit higher PPI and pixel density on the XPS 13, but in reality, both computers are fairly similar. They're both using IPS LED backlit technology, so the viewing angles are quite fantastic, and the colors look very vibrant and saturated as well. Now, one thing that's cool about both of these computers is they actually both have really good external speakers, considering the size and overall compact form factor. So let's go ahead and listen to both external speakers and listen to which sounds best. Now, continuing forward, let's talk about the internal performance on these two notebooks. Now, the XPS 13 actually has a pretty powerful internal CPU. It's using the new Broadwell 5th generation Intel Core i5 processor. We have the 5200U in this specific computer over here. You can also configure it for different CPU performance and frequencies, but this one is clocked at about 2.2 gigahertz, and it can turbo up to 2.7 gigahertz. It has 3 megabytes of level 3 cache, and in terms of RAM, we have 8 gigabytes of DDR3 that is non-removable, and graphics, we're using the Intel 5500 series of graphics. Now, on the 12-inch MacBook, we're using a completely different architecture, still an Intel processor, but an Intel Core M processor, clocked in quite a bit lower at 1.1 gigahertz, and it can turbo up to 2.4 gigahertz. It has 4 megabytes of level 3 cache. You can obviously upgrade this internal processor by a slight margin by giving Apple a couple of $100, and they'll give you a little bit faster frequency. In terms of RAM, we have 8 gigabytes, which is nice to see. It's also non-removable, and in terms of graphics, we're using the Intel 5300 series of graphics. Now, with all that spec stuff out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the benchmark results to see which one is actually faster. Now, the first thing that we're going to take a look at is our Cinebench benchmarking results, which is going to test our CPU performance, and here is the eventual scores. We're getting about 249 points on the XPS 13, about 207 points on our 12-inch MacBook, so definitely faster on the XPS 13 side. Definitely no surprise there. It's a much faster CPU that is designed for productivity and multimedia editing, and I think the 12-inch is more in lines of like a web browsing machine. In terms of the graphical performance, we're going to take a look at the Heaven benchmark results. We're going to set both of these computers to 720p, and we're going to set to no anti-aliasing and just set our quality settings to medium settings. And over here, we're getting about 20.5 average frames per second on the XPS 13 and about 14.6 average frames per second on the 12-inch MacBook. Now, I did game a little bit on the MacBook, and it was fine in playing games like Minecraft and Dota, so no problems in terms of gaming at a moderate resolution on the 12-inch MacBook. You're just not going to be doing any kind of hardcore FPS or playing GTA 5 on it or anything like that. Now, moving on, let's talk about the storage configuration on both these two computers. computers. They're both using flash memory, but let's go ahead and take a look at the actual speed difference between the two. We have 128 gigabyte models on both computers, and we're just going to transfer about 932 megabyte file from one area to the next. And we're just going to measure the time it takes to complete that transfer. And on the XPS 13, it took about 6.2 seconds and about 4.36 seconds on the MacBook, which gives us about 150.32 megabytes per second on the XPS 13 versus over 213 megabytes per second on our 12-inch MacBook. So the SSD configuration on the MacBook is quite a bit faster than the system we have on the XPS 13 based on this test. Now, the last thing that we're going to talk about is the overall battery performance I got on both of these two computers. Now, in terms of capacity, we have a 52 watt-hour battery on the XPS 13 and about 29 watt-hour battery on the 12-inch MacBook. Now, the manufacturers specify that if you get the full HD version of the XPS 13, you'll get around 15 hours of usage and about 11 hours on the model that we have, which is the Quad HD resolution screen. If you go with the MacBook, Apple says that you'll get around 9 hours of web browsing performance. And basically what I did to test out those facts is I used both computers in a very similar circumstance, 40% maximum brightness, basically did a little bit of web browsing in terms of just using my Google Docs, maybe watching a little bit of videos here. On average, I had about 4 to 8 tabs. I listened to a little bit of music and just did my typical day-to-day usage that I do on my laptop. And basically after several days of usage, I averaged around 8 hours 52 minutes on the XPS 13, and on the MacBook I got about 8 hours 45 minutes. So in most cases, it looks like you're going to get just a few more minutes on the XPS 13, but again, this is based on my personal usage behaviors. Your usage behavior might differ, but generally speaking, you are going to get slightly better battery performance on the XPS 13, mainly due to the fact that the battery on the 12-inch is quite a bit smaller in terms of capacity, which is going to result in that lower score. But definitely doing not a bad job at all, and I'm sure you can go throughout the day on both of these two computers without having any major issues when it comes to battery life. But really on that, guys, that's really, make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know on which computer you guys think has the most to offer. Although I do like the design and form factor on the 12-inch MacBook, and that's really going to be the design direction that Apple is going to go with their new lineup of MacBook computers. And even though in terms of value, I think the XPS 13 offers a lot more for your money, and certainly if you get the 1080p version, it's really quite a good deal. But the 12-inch is going to be great for a lot of people that want a really unique, compact laptop that's going to deliver an amazing display experience. It just doesn't have the touchscreen options and things like that we have on the XPS 13. But really, in order to make the best decision, you have to use this video as a guide and then go out and use both computers yourself and see which one best fits your personal needs. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely check out our channel for more videos like this. And if you want any information about each product, we have Amazon affiliate links down below. And if you go through any of our links, we get a little bit of kickback. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it makes videos like this possible. Thanks again for watching. See you later. Take care.